South Africa's emergency response system is under severe pressure from devastating wildfires and violent crimes to natural disasters. The cracks in our system are becoming harder to ignore. Experts warn that outdated infrastructure and slow reporting times are not only costing resources, but they're costing lives. Around the world, cities are turning to technology. Drones, sensors, body cams, artificial intelligence, and also cloud-enabled platforms to cut response times and rebuild trust. Could South Africa follow this path and revolutionize the way we protect communities? Well, that's a big question that we're going to be asking our guest today. He's the executive chairperson of SENTIV. We are joined by Brother RESHAAD Shah. RESHAAD, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to Straight Talk on Radio Al Ansar.
Wa alaikum assalam, Seraj. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the program this evening. Talking about this very important issue. Now, South Africa's emergency response system is under enormous strain, as we know. As I mentioned, there are so many factors at play. From your perspective, what are the biggest gaps that we find in our current system?
I think to start with, assessing what those gaps could be, you must understand that, of course, the first major challenge that we have is in terms of capacity. And this is not a technology issue. This is really about the ability to respond rapidly. So in other words, having enough metro police officers, having enough fire engines and fire fighters, having enough paramedics to respond rapidly to any incident. That's, I think, is the first challenge. That's not what we can address. What we can address, really speaking, is when we know that it's constrained in terms of that capacity, what can technology do to enable those first responders to get faster to a scene? What can we enable them with in terms of knowledge and understanding that when they do get to the scene, they're able to coordinate their response with each other? And very importantly, getting the right type of resource to that scene. You know, it could be a paramedic, it could be a firefighter. Maybe you just need a police officer.
Absolutely. So experts warn that the outdated systems that we have, they're slow in reporting times and they often, are costing lives. So why is South Africa lagging behind in modernizing its emergency response infrastructure?
I think it's not just South Africa. You will find that in many emerging markets, countries, and major cities in the world, it will always lag behind the leaders in the technology space from an emergency response perspective. Now, in diagnosing what those challenges are, the first is, if we think about it, is the ability for a coordinated communications capability between the various types of first responders. So that's one area where there is some amount of lag. But importantly, having a centralized command and control capability that enables the right type of resource to get to a scene and respond is another. Now, if we look at some of the more advanced cities in the world, what they've done well is they've used a multitude of technology to firstly get their first responders faster to a scene. And in some cases, like in some US cities, as well as some European cities, they use drones as their first responder because the drone can get there much faster than a police vehicle. So why they do that is so that they can already start streaming to this command and control center a view of what's happening on that scene to ensure the safety of the first responder, but also to ensure that the right type of resource gets there. So that plays a really, really critical role. Now, we're not there yet. At the minimum, what we should have as step one is have the ability to have a command and control center type view for all the different types of first responders, including private security, because private security plays a critical role in many of our incidents that we would have in any of our cities, whether it's a housebreaking or whether it's an accident. Having those first responders included in a coordinated communications platform and capability, which is something that we offer, right? So that's the one area. But other technology advancements in the form of body-worn cameras that a paramedic could use, that a police officer would use when he arrives at the scene, also enables him to be streaming back to his command and control center, his control room, what's going on in the scene. And that video evidence can form an important component in what happens later on as they get through the closing down of a scene or the investigations related to that scene, and sometimes possibly leading into a court case and using that video feed as evidence in that specific incident. So, it's now impacting on the justice system as well, because you're
Right.
collecting evidence in an immutable way that can't be modified through a body-worn camera platform.
Absolutely. So, when you talk about the introduction of AI and drones, there are concerns that are being raised about surveillance and data privacy, which often comes up. These are the concerns that people raise. So, how do we balance efficiency and safety, while protecting citizens' rights as well?
Well, at the base of it, any information gathering solution, whether it's a CCTV camera, which you see throughout the streets today, and those CCTV cameras are either public owned or public controlled, or more often than not, business owned and controlled, right? As long as the correct signage is in place, that would allow for that video capture to take place. But in addition to that, you also have body-worn cameras where when somebody shows up to a scene and is recording that video, that information is not available to a public forum. It's actually available only to that law enforcement agency. So from that perspective, at the base of it, you will definitely always manage the privacy requirements of it and be compliant with GDPR and as well as POPIA, which are two important data protection acts and laws that are in place. But importantly, there's a trade-off, right? So, at some point, you need to think about this trade-off of between safety and security of the first responder himself. In other words, the police officer or the paramedic who's arriving at a scene, as well as the citizens around them. And it's a very, very easy trade-off to make that for this little amount of data intrusion, if I would call it that, the value and benefits that it brings from a safety and security perspective are just significant enough that those concerns can be very easily allayed.
Now, criminals are getting more sophisticated and they're even targeting healthcare facilities like hospitals. So how can technology help secure such critical services and essential infrastructure?
Critical infrastructure today is not well protected in public spaces. And having a security guard or having a high fence is insufficient. So where technology plays a critical role is that those infrastructure needs to be protected from actual sensors and industrial IoT devices. Those industrial IoT devices are simple things like an intrusion detection in an area that contains critical equipment that human beings should not be present in. So that's the first easy one. And we're not talking about a standard passive sensor. We're talking about industrial IoT objects that's able to detect human movement or human presence, that's able to pick up temperature changes in the area, that's able to pick up a vibration through a vibration sensor and alert the necessary control center or authority to respond to that specific incident, with its specific location. It's switching on the close by CCTV camera to capture a video feed of what's happening as it relates to that critical infrastructure.
So, RESHAAD, if South Africa fully embraced tech-driven emergency responses, what could the system look like within the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
I think the first thing you're going to impact in that path to getting a positive change in emergency response is that enablement will provide a faster response time, firstly. So while we do know that we do have a capacity issue, at least by reducing those response times, you can get more of those first responders to many more scenes of incidents, whether it's a crime or an accident, you'd be able to get a better utilization level of that first responder. That's the first big thing. The second is using the data collected from those scenes to ensure you have successful prosecutions, as another example, because you're now collecting evidence in an immutable way to ensure that you're able to prosecute those that were the bad actors in a specific incident.
Reshad, thank you so much for your time and uncovering this issue with us this evening. It's been great having you on. Hope you have a wonderful evening going forward.
Thank you. Take care.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wrong
one. There we go. That is Reshad Shah. He's the executive chairperson of SENTIV, and we're talking about changing South Africa's response time, in terms of emergencies and some very new, innovative ideas. We certainly are lagging behind, but who knows? We may just catch up at some point or another.
Straight Talk is proudly sponsored by World of Travel.
Gaza needs your support more than ever. Homes have been shattered and families have lost everything.